Hi children, welcome to grade 6 English and this is our session 2 in chapter number 2, the selfish giant. In our previous session, we have completed reading the comic strip, Hypomania and Mystery to Solve. I hope you all are really excited to get into our story. And now, let us start this session with a prayer. All of you sit straight and close your eyes and let us thank God for giving us this wonderful opportunity for learning. Asato ma satgamaya tamaso ma jyotirgamaya mrityoma amritam kamaya. Shanti, Shanti, Shanti. Children, rub your hands together, keep it on your eyes, open your eyes gently and slowly. And now let us start this session with an activity. Now you have to think and share about your favorite story character. Yes, I hope you have read so many stories, right? And in that story, what is your favorite character? And you have to describe that character. It may be their appearance, yes, or their way of behaving. Yes, you can describe whatever comes to your mind about them. Yes, children? Okay. In your note, you can write it and send me through grade 6 English Google Classroom. And in your concept book, take page number 21. Before getting into our story, let us read the conversation between the aliens and Robono. Astrida, I don't understand why people have signs in front of their houses like private property. Dillida, that's because they own the property and have a right to do so. Astrida, you are right, but then what will other people do if they can't own property? Robono, in that case, places like parks, community centers, etc. belong to the public. That's why they are known as public property and everyone has a right to use them. Here, we are going on to start our reading of the story, right? The selfish giant. And before that, these aliens and Robono, they are making an interesting conversation. That is, Astrid asked for, I don't understand why people, they are always keeping signs such as private property in front of their houses or their places. Yes, and for that, Drillidag is saying that's because that is their property and they own them, so they have a right to do so. Yes, and for that, Astridak is asking, you are right. But what will other people who don't have any property for themselves, okay, what they will do? And for that, Robono is giving an explanation. In that case, places like parks, community centers, etc., they belong to the public. There are some other places also, children, that is library, temple. Yes, these are all public places, right? That is why they are known as public property and everyone has a right to use them. Yes, this sounds interesting, right? Okay. Now, we can see the buzzwords. And in your concept book, page number 21, you can see the buzzwords, children. First one, selfish. One who cares only about himself. Yes, the person who is always thinking about their self. We call them as selfish. And second one, ogre. A frightening giant. A very frightening, very big giant. We call him as ogre. Third one, gruff. rough and low pitch of voice, a very rough voice. Trespassers, a person entering someone's land without permission. When a person enter into someone's land without their permission, we call them as trespasser. Yes? Okay. Fifth one is prosecuted. Conducted legal proceedings against a person or an organization. When you are going to conduct a legal proceeding, okay, legal activity against a person or an organization, we call it as prosecuted. And sixth one, wander. Walk aimlessly. Walking somewhere without any aim. And seventh one, linnet. A small brown and grey bird. A very small brown and grey colored bird. Eighth one, seized. Brought to an end. That is, it comes to an end. That we call it as seized. Ninth one, twittering. Birds calling out consistently. Birds calling out consistently. When birds, they are making sound consistently. Yes, that we call it as twittering. 10th one, feeble. Lack of physical strength due to old age. Due to old age, we will be lacking our physical strength and we will become very weak. Right? That we call it as feeble. And marvelous. Amazing. Marvelous. Amazing. Hastened, be quick to do something. Hastened, be quick to do something. Very quickly doing something. Slay, kill. Slay, kill. Casement, a window or part of a window set on a vertical hinge so that it opens like a door. A window that is set on a vertical hinge so that it opens like a door. It is actually a window, but it opens like a door. Clear, children? Are you all clear with all these buzzwords? Yes. And now we are moving on to read our story, The Selfish Giant. In your concept book, page number 21. Yes. Every afternoon, after coming from school, the children went to play in the giant's garden. It was a large, lovely garden with soft green grass, beautiful flowers stood like stars, and there were 12 peach trees that in the springtime broke out into delicate blossoms of pink and pearl and bore rich fruit in the autumn. The birds sat on the trees and sang so sweetly that the children stopped their games in order to listen to them. How happy we are here, they cried to each other. Every afternoon, after coming from school, the children used to go inside the giant's garden. It was very large and lovely garden. There are so many soft green grass, beautiful flowers, look like stars, and there were 12 peach trees. In springtime, they broke out into delicate blossoms of pink and pearl. That is, it bore flowers of pink and pearl. And in autumn, it bore a rich fruit. Yes? Okay. And the birds sat on the trees and sang so sweetly. The children, they usually, what they will do? They stop their games in order to listen to the birds singing. How happy we are here, they cried to each other. And one day, the giant came back. He had gone to visit his friend the Cornish ogre and had stayed with him for 7 years. When he returned, he saw the children playing in the garden. "What are you doing here?" he cried in a very gruff voice, and the children ran away. "This is my garden," said the giant. "I will allow nobody to play in it." So he built a high wall all round it and put up a notice board. One day, the giant came back after visiting his friend the Cornish ogre, and he stayed there for 7 years. And while he returned back, he saw the children playing in his garden. He got very angry and he cried in a very gruff voice, "What are you doing here?" So the children, they got frightened and they ran away. "This is my garden," said the Jane. "I will allow nobody to play in it." So he built a very high wall all around the garden and put up a notice board. What the notice board said? "Trespassers will be prosecuted." That is, the persons who are entering my garden without my permission, they will be prosecuted. That is, I will take legal action against them. Okay, that is the board said that trespassers will be prosecuted. And he was indeed a very selfish giant. The poor children now had nowhere to play. They tried to play on the road, but the road was very dusty and full of hard stones. They wandered round the high wall when their lessons were over and talked about the beautiful garden inside. "How happy we were there," they said to each other. Then the spring came, and all over the country there were little blossoms and little birds. Only in the garden of Selfish Jane it was still winter. The birds did not care to sing in it, as there were no children and the trees forgot to blossom. "I cannot understand why the spring is so late in coming," said the Selfish Jane as he sat at the window and looked out at his cold white garden. "I hope there will be a change in the weather soon." But the spring never came, nor the summer. The autumn gave golden fruit to every garden, but to the Jane's garden she gave none. "He is too selfish," she said. So it was always winter there, and the north wind and the hail and the frost and the snow danced about through the trees. One morning the Jane lay awake in bed when he heard some lovely music. It sounded so sweet to his ears that he thought it must be the king's musicians passing by. It was really only a little linnet singing outside his window, but it was so long since he had heard a bird singing in his garden that it seemed to him to be the most beautiful music in the world. Then the hail stopped dancing over his head, and the north wind ceased roaring, and a delicious perfume came to him through the open casement. "I believe the spring has come at last," said the Jane, and he jumped out of the bed and looked out. He was indeed a very selfish giant, so that he kept the board saying, "Trespassers will be prosecuted." The poor children, they had no place to play. They tried to play on the road, but the road was full of dust and full of hard stones. So they wandered here and there without any aim around the high wall after their lessons got over, and they will be talking about the beautiful garden and how they used to play there. "How happy we were there," they said to each other in a very sad manner. Okay. Then the spring came all over the country. The spring season came all over the country. There were so many little blossoms and little birds, but only in the garden of the Selfish Giant it was still winter. The birds did not come to his garden, as there were no children, and the trees also, they forgot to blossom inside Jane's garden. And the Selfish Giant got confused. "Why the spring is so late in coming to my garden?" he said. He sat at the window and looked outside. It was very cold and it was a white garden. "I hope there will be a change in the weather soon," he thought to himself. But the spring never came, nor the summer. The autumn season came to all the other gardens, and it gave golden fruit to every garden. But to the Jane's garden, she gave none, because he is very selfish, she said. So it was always winter there. And what were the things that were found in Jane's garden? The north wind. The north wind that roars very heavily, and the hail. Hail means drizzling. Drizzling during the snow season, right? That we call it as hail. And the frost. Frost means all the things got frozen. And the snow danced about through the trees. Only the north wind, hail, frost and the snow, they were found in Jane's garden. One morning, the giant lay awake in his bed. At that time, he heard some lovely music. First, he thought that it was king's musicians passing by. It sounded so sweet to his ears because he heard it so long. Yes, it was really only a little linnet bird singing outside his window. But it was so long, he never heard a bird sing in his garden, that it seemed to him the most beautiful music in the world. He felt like it was the very beautiful music in the world. Then the hail stopped dancing. The drizzling stopped and the north wind, it stopped roaring, and a delicious perfume came to him through the open casement, that is his window. Okay, the giant felt very happy. I believe the spring has come at last, he said, and jumped out of the bed and looked out. Yes, and after this, what will happen? Okay, now all of you take your note and summarize the story in 4 to 5 lines, children. Okay, until this part of the story, you write all the important incidents that happened in the story. Yes? Okay. And now, we are reading the next part of the story in your concept book, page number 23. Yes, children? Have you seen this picture? Yes, there were so many children playing in the giant's garden very happily. Yes? Okay, now let's see what happened next in the story. What did he see? He saw the most wonderful sight. Through a little hole in the wall, the children had crept in, and they were sitting on the branches of the trees. On every tree that he could see, there was a little child, and the trees were so glad to have the children back again, and they had covered themselves with blossoms and waved their arms gently above the children's heads. The birds flew about and twittered with delight, and the flowers looked up through the green grass and laughed. It was a lovely scene, and only in one corner it was still winter. It was the farthest corner of the garden. In it stood a little boy. He was so small that he could not reach up to the branches of the tree, and he was wandering all round it, crying bitterly. The poor tree was still quite covered with snow and frost, and the north wind blew and roared above it. "Climb up, little boy," said the tree, and it bent its branches down as low as it could, but the little boy was too tiny. Okay, children, the giant jumped out of his bed and looked out in his window, right? And what did he just see there? He saw the most wonderful sight. Through the little hole in the wall, the children had crept inside the garden, and they were sitting on all the branches of the trees. He can able to see a little child in every tree, and the blossoms and waved their arms gently above the children's heads. There he can see the trees covered themselves with blossoms, so many flowers, and it waved their arms gently above the children's heads. And the birds flew about and twittered with delight. The birds, they were very happy and they were twittering with delight. And the flowers looked up through the green grass and laughed. Then the flowers were laughing. It was a lovely scene, and only in one corner it was still winter. The giant got confused. It was the farthest corner of the garden, and in it stood a little boy. He was so small, he could not able to climb up the branches of the tree. He was wandering all around it, and he was crying. He was crying so much. Okay, the poor tree was still quite covered with frost and snow. As that little boy, he cannot able to climb in the branches of that tree. The poor tree was still covered by frost and snow, and the north wind still blew and wrote about that particular tree. And the tree was asking the little boy, "Climb up, little boy," said the tree. And it bent its branches down as low as it could, but the little boy was too tiny. He cannot able to climb it. Yes, children? Are you all clear about the story till now, children? Yes. And now, in your note, you summarize till this part of the story what we have learned. Yes, children? And what are the main points from the story you can summarize in your note? Yes, children? Yeah. And today's home assignment for this session. You have to imagine, predict and complete the story. After this part, what will happen in the story? You just imagine, predict and complete the story, children. And another one home assignment for this session is you have to read the chapter 2 buzzwords. Before starting this session, we have read the buzzwords, right? You have to read all the buzzwords and its meanings thoroughly and write one time in your note. After completing the homework, you have to submit it in grade 6 English Google's Classroom and complete your homework before the due date, children. Yes? I hope you enjoy this session with me, and don't forget to eat healthy food, drink plenty of water and reduce your screen time. Don't step outside of your home. Always stay home and stay safe. Thank you so much, children.